Film is something, obviously, that can move us. It can make us happy, it can make us sad, it can make us angry. It can even make us horny. But if I look at all the films I watched over 2024, none have left me feeling so many emotions than The Whale. This film, directed by Darren Aronofsky, was released in 2022. This film is incredibly depressing, there is no denying it. Spoilers, by the way, I'm just about to spoil the film this next sentence. If you clicked on this and you didn't realise it was going to be full of spoilers, then I think you're stupid. We follow a man named Charlie, the week leading up to his death. He is morbidly obese, which has led to his health seriously declining and has given him a heart condition that eventually kills him. He also teaches English to college students online, but he keeps his webcam turned off, suggesting that he feels shame for the way he looks and what others will think of him. He tries, but seemingly fails, to reconnect with his daughter that he walked out on years prior. He wants the best for her, but she wants absolutely none of it, and she holds clear, deep resentment for him. It feels like nothing is going right for Charlie, and it feels like the end of the film is just inevitable at this point. There is this sense of dread and hopelessness that grows throughout the film until the final crescendo at the end. However, despite these overly depressing themes, there is an air of hope present, and that is what we will discuss in this video. But this hope isn't without its flaws. Also, before we dive into my analysis, I want to mention that this kind of battle between hope and hopelessness, kind of the positive and the negative, is not just present in the film but also outside of the film. Some feel, including Brendan Fraser, who played Charlie, that this is like an empathetic portrayal of obesity. He's not the butt of the joke, and the film takes time to show you why he is the way he is and why he's made these decisions or had these compulsions. But others view it as a very negative representation of fat people, and that the story itself is fatphobic, especially a lot of the cinematography and the way they show Charlie. Even though I absolutely love this film, I don't think there's any denying that both of these opinions are very equally valid, I feel. Anyway, now that's out the way, let's jump into it. Regarding the hopelessness of the film, I want to first talk about the framing. One of the first things you notice when watching the film is the aspect ratio. It's a square 4:3. This framing is obviously narrower than a standard widescreen format you see in film, which creates this suffocating visual experience. By focusing the viewer's gaze in this confined space, it really amplifies the intensity of Charlie's emotions and of his isolation. For example, during moments of conflict or emotional breakdown, like the scene where he binge eats, the lack of peripheral space really forces the viewer to look at what's happening. And also, this narrowing also, I feel, reflects Charlie's own emotional state, where his world has just been reduced to this one room, really, his like living room kitchen, with no sense of freedom or escape. He sees no way out of his life. This framing choice makes the audience feel this entrapment. They cannot look left or right. Neither the viewer or Charlie can escape. The setting of the whale is another significant contributor to the film's pervasive sense of hopelessness. His home is very cluttered and almost always dimly lit, and Charlie is sat right in the middle of his living room kitchen for the majority of the film, giving us the ability to look all around this room as the camera pans around him. His physical confinement becomes a metaphor for his mental state. Trapped, isolated, and stagnant. The darkness and messiness of his home is a visual representation of his state of mind, alongside his physical inability to clean it. Some interpretations of the film suggest that Charlie's weight is a visual representation of his guilt or his depression, and the film intensifies this, I think, by never really giving us a glimpse of what the outside of his house looks like too much, or really what his life was like before, apart from that one flashback on the beach. And even when others open the door, the outside world looks grim. It's often pouring down with rain, which I feel is also a symbol for his mental state. Pathetic fallacy. Simple. Rain keeps people indoors, just as Charlie's emotional state keeps him indoors. The only moment of sunshine is right at the end, but obviously this too carries a grim implication. The sun isn't a symbol of hope or a better life, it's of heaven, of his death. I can't feel my foot. And obviously, the narrative is also hopeless, as well as incredibly depressing. Nothing goes well for Charlie, and I mean nothing. You have to almost throughout the film come to terms with the fact that nothing's going to get better for him. You have to realise that yes, he is going to die, and that the film I decided to just casually watch one day is going to make me burst into tears. Some examples of this in the plot is his financial situation, as he says he can't afford to go to the hospital, until we later find out he's been storing away all the money he's earned from teaching, specifically for his daughter. He can afford to go to the hospital, but he believes that it would be a waste as he's already accepted his death in a way. The whole film feels like a man trying to tie up loose ends before his death, part of that being the hope he has for his daughter's future. See, I told you there was both hope and hopelessness. Another example is the very relationship he has with his daughter Ellie. She has very clearly made up her mind about what she thinks of her dad, and she makes that very clear. She hates him. I really don't think anything that he does changes her mind until literally the very end of the film, where she seems somewhat sad. Well, she seems very sad. She looks very sad. The lack of progress in this relationship adds to this hopelessness. You do understand why Ellie thinks of Charlie in this way, but because the film takes so much time to make you sympathise for Charlie, you naturally want them to get along, which never happens. The final example I want to mention is the scene where Charlie finally turns on his camera to his students, revealing what he really looks like to them, and then he throws his laptop against the wall. This scene really filled me with the most dread, because he's completely throwing away this important pillar of his life, and obviously it's part of his daily routine. It was the only thing he had in his life, and this scene shows that for Charlie there is no going back, and that his death feels even more certain than before. One of the most striking moments in the film is when Charlie asks his students to write something honest. This scene is deeply moving but also profoundly hopeless. It reveals not just Charlie's despair, but also that of his college-age students. One student's submission, "I think I need to accept that my life isn't going to be very exciting," feels particularly impactful for me personally. This sentiment really reflects a universal fear, I think. The dread of unfulfilled dreams and the possibility of being stuck in a boring, monotonous existence. This one really hit me the hardest personally, as I said. It really resonated with my own fears of the future. Should I simply accept this? Should I just be content with it? It's a painful question, but an honest one. And obviously, honesty is something that Charlie puts a lot of emphasis on throughout the film. After rewatching the film, something that I've been wondering is why Charlie is so concerned with honesty in the first place. I guess maybe he thinks that he should have been more honest in his life. Maybe he believes he never should have gotten with a woman and had a child if he knew he was never attracted to women. But then again, I guess that's dishonest. But would that also not be affected by societal expectations and homophobia? It's something a lot more complicated than just being honest and dishonest. Let me know what you think about Charlie's obsession with honesty. I would love to hear what you think about this, because I don't know. And now moving on to the hope in the film. While Charlie doesn't seem to have much hope for himself, he places an immense amount of faith in others, especially his daughter. He refuses to believe that anyone is beyond caring, and he always sees the best in people. He deeply wants Ellie to succeed, viewing everything she does through this optimistic lens. Like, for example, I clearly think she wanted to ruin that missionary's life, but ended up finding out that his parents don't care, and then Charlie thinks that that was purposeful, that it was to benefit him. And his hope for his daughter becomes obvious when we find out he has been storing away over $100,000 just for her. As I said, he could use this money for himself, but he has no hope for himself, but he has hope for her future. And this dynamic really is just the dichotomy I've been speaking about this whole time. However, his positivity maybe is too strong. You know, it is to a fault. In the scene with his ex-wife and daughter, despite both of them yelling and swearing at him, he really refuses to let go of this hope. He does express regret on walking out on his family, but he still doesn't want himself or his ex-wife to give up on Ellie. He continually tries to repair the past, but really to no avail. Despite his attitude now, what he did in the past cannot be changed. His overwhelming positivity and hope blinds him from the fact that he seriously hurt people and really changed the whole trajectory of their lives. This is the scene where Charlie famously exclaims, "I need to know that I've done one thing right with my life." A truly Oscar-winning moment, and the first but not the last time I cried during this film. Apart from being such a tearjerker, it also encapsulates what this video is saying about Charlie. He knows that he's going to die and have a short life, but he wants to die knowing that he has left some kind of positive mark on this world. On a broader level, the film also touches on a hopeful societal shift towards a more compassionate understanding of morbid obesity. In the past, and honestly, yeah, still to this day, people like Charlie were often depicted in shows like My 600-Pound Life, where the focus was largely on mockery and judgment. There were so many commentary YouTubers that would frequently mock these people, show no empathy or understanding for why they might be the way they are, and also would shame people who enable them. Obviously, we see this like person buying food for Charlie as well in the film, which I wish they explored a bit more of why someone would do that. However, as we see in The Whale, there is a growing awareness that obesity isn't simply the result of just poor decision making or lack of willpower. It's so much more complex. Brendan Fraser, who plays Charlie, emphasized the extensive research he did to prepare for this role, saying, "I had many conversations with members of that association who gave me testimonials about their lives. It made me just highlight and underline the necessity of telling a story with as much dignity as possible." Through his research, he learned how deeply personal and emotional the experience of obesity can be. He also acknowledged that food addiction and emotional trauma are central to the struggles many people with obesity face. He noted that these individuals were often caught in a strange sort of limbo that the healthcare system places them in. This emphasizes that obesity is not just a physical condition, but also a mental one. I think that Charlie's character specifically grapples with binge eating disorder, which is a recognized mental health condition alongside anorexia and others. As I said, it's not just about a lack of control, it's about trying to manage overwhelming emotions through food. The film gives us a glimpse into the emotional devastation that drives people like Charlie to this point. Overeating, like addiction in general, becomes a way of coping with depression, trauma. Obviously in the film, Charlie begins to overeat as a way to cope with the death of his boyfriend, but just as he turns to food, some people turn to drugs or alcohol. If you take that binge eating scene, which happens after the pizza delivery guy sees Charlie for the first time, you swap out the food for drugs or alcohol, the feeling you would get from watching it doesn't change. Some people say that with the music, it really feels like a scene of a horror film, which is probably why some people criticize this film. It's uncomfortable to watch, just like a lot of Darren Aronofsky films. He makes sounds about pushing bodies to the extreme. It's very weird. I can think of other scenes in films that people do this, but just with drugs. Think of like Queer or Beautiful Boy, or even The Brutalist, which I saw recently. Binge eating disorder is a recognised mental health condition for a reason, and the film encourages us to rethink how we view people like Charlie. It urges us to see their struggles with more compassion and less judgment. Despite its controversies, I think that The Whale is a beautifully depressing film that really leaves us with so much to think about even after the credits roll. Maybe you relate to the grief that has overtaken every facet of Charlie's life, or the addiction he developed as a way to cope with it. Maybe you relate to the anger and frustration of Ellie, or the idealization of Thomas. But along with that, hopefully my 10 out of 10 analysis. I hope that a light has been shined, I don't know what it is, on the vital message of compassion and hope in this film. As Charlie pointedly says in the final moments of the film, people are incapable of not caring. People are amazing.